Hey guys, this is a fishing hobby here, and I just kind of wanted to share with everybody a unique fishing technique that I've been using for I guess a little over a year now, and it's it's using a Tenkara rod, but I don't fish the Tenkara rod the way they were made to be fished. I do it a little different. These rods I think were really kind of designed for trout fishing, and I don't do a lot of trout fishing. I prefer warm water fishing, like for sunfish and bass and things like that. So I don't use the rod the way it was intended to be used. In fact, if anybody's watching this that's a Tenkara enthusiast, you might want to click off of this right now because this will probably frustrate you. Okay, so anyway, what I do is I fish for warm water fish, and I use line that nobody in their right mind probably would even think to use. What I found is the best is this yellow line here. It's actually it's a Mason's line. I got it at Home Depot, and this line here, the white line, is made very similar. They're both polypropylene, and polypropylene is light, and this, if you'll do a couple of false casts to knock the water off of this line, it'll float for quite a while before it starts to sink. And the only reason it sinks is because it just kind of gets waterlogged. But the material itself is lighter than water, so it has a natural tendency to float. And even when it does start to sink, it doesn't get very deep into the water. It kind of is near the top. And I really like this yellow. It's easy to see. And the reason I'm not so concerned about fishing the technically correct way for Tenkara is because I'm mostly looking to maximize the distance on my casts. And you know, most Tenkara fishermen are trying to, their main objective is to keep the line off the water. I'm not concerned with that at all. So if my line's laid out as far as I can get it, and it's on top of the water, I can really see the yellow line move, and the white you can see really well too, but this yellow line is actually a little bit smaller in diameter than the white. This white line came from Walmart in the fishing section, and it's kind of set up for you know, if you're doing trot lines and things like that. It's also a polypropylene line, and it floats well too. It's just a little bit bigger around, and actually if I could find some that was a little smaller in diameter than this, in fact, if anybody knows of anywhere you can find some smaller diameter polypropylene line, I'd like to have some to use for myself. This is just a little bit thicker than what I'd like, but it's really not that big of a deal, because, or at least you can get away with it, because you use a leader, and this works really well. This is some 6-pound test. It's a P-line fluoro clear. It is a mono, but it's coated with fluorocarbon coating, so it's a little less visible in the water. And 4-pound, 6-pound line would be what I'd recommend. This rod that I used is actually a little bit stiffer than some of them, and it can take a little more abuse, so you might get away with 6-pound line. I've used it quite a bit, and I haven't broke a rod tip yet, knock on wood, but this rod came with an extra tip. If something ever does happen, I'll be able to fix it, but I I would rather not have that happen. So a lot of times I use this 4-pound Trilene XL. It works really well. Or I also use a 4-pound fluorocarbon. And I think once you get down to 4-pound test line, I'm not sure if the fluorocarbon is any less visible in all reality than the Trilene is, because it's such a small diameter. And for the type of fishing I do, I really don't think the fish are that in tune with the line, or they're not that worried about it, like you might have with trout. And the way that I tie my lines is I use I use a leader on the front end. I use a 6-foot long leader, and the line itself I use a 10-foot section. Now this is a 12-foot rod, and I use a 10-foot section of the polypropylene line and a 6-foot section of the fluorocarbon or mono, whatever I'm using at the time, and that gives you a total of 16 feet of line plus your 12-foot rod. So you can see, if you're fishing on small creeks or rivers, you can really lay a cast out there quite a ways. And most of the ones I fish on, I can reach to one side or the other if I'm in the middle of the creek in my kayak. And then on the other end, I have some that's just 20-pound backing, Dacron backing for fly fishing that I use to make a loop with. And I like this tied to the tip section because it's a little more pliable than the polypropylene line, a little less stiff. So, and you know, I just use a perfection loop on the polypropylene line, and then I just use a hitch to attach my loop, and then I hitch the loop onto the end of the rod. And if you're not familiar with Tenkara rods, the tip section has a part on the end that's flexible and it's attached to the tip of the rod, and you can see how small the diameter of that is. It's extremely thin. And this piece here is called the Lillian. So I just attach with a hitch onto the Lillian, and as you can see, the tip section of this rod is very, very small in diameter. And I was a little worried that, you know, larger fish might break the rod pretty easily, since your line's just tied straight on to that tip section. But I caught a decent bass the other day with it, and it made a few runs, and it didn't break the rod, so that was encouraging. Now, the reason people might say, well, why don't you use like a cane pole or one of the fiberglass cane poles or something? And you could do that. This rod is so thin and supple that I can cast, you know, a weightless. This will be something else that'll make Tenkara fishermen mad, but I use live bait on it a lot with just a bare hook and no weight. And in fact, that's what I caught the bass. I'll show a little video clip of the bass and maybe a picture or something at the end of this. But I caught the bass on a cricket with a number 8 Aberdeen hook. So it's a small hook and weightless, just throwing it out there. And the reason why the Tenkara rod does such a good job of that is because it's made for fly fishing. It will cast out little to no weight quite a distance. And fishing weightless with live bait is really fun, and it's you know, you can't really cast with it. Even the smallest ultralight spinning reel, you won't get much distance on a small hook with a cricket on it and nothing else. You know, you might get a cast 10 to 15 feet, and that's about it. With this, I can cast twice that distance, depending on how long I set my line up. And the really nice thing about it is if you're fishing on a creek or on a small creek or a small river, most of the time I get a hit almost immediately when what I'm fishing with hits the water, whether it's a lure or if it's if it's a live bait of some sort. So, you know, usually within a few seconds, if I haven't had a bite, there's probably not a fish right in that general vicinity, so I'll reel in and make another cast. Well, with this Tenkara rod, I can make cast after cast with no reeling. I'm just picking my line up out of the water and doing a loop above my head like you would if you're fly fishing, and casting it right back out into a different spot. And once you practice with it a little bit, you can get very accurate with your casting on it. I can usually put whatever bait I'm using within, you know, a foot radius of where I'm trying to cast to, which is, you know, for me that's good. It's better than I can do with a spinning reel. But and if you go back through and look at some of my videos, I've got videos that show some of the modifications that I did on this rod quite a while back. I added these line keepers for wrapping my line on it for transportation reasons, and if you need some sort of a line management solution on your rod, these work really well. And I've got a little loop here on the end and a loop on my cap, on my rod cap. So it's just a little keeper for that cap, and you just use a loop-to-loop connection to secure that so you don't lose it, because I'm bad about losing things. So, and it does dangle while you're fishing. I don't ever notice it, so it doesn't bother me. It might bother somebody, but I never even notice it's hanging off the end of the rod like that. But I just thought I would share a little bit about, you know, what I use for warm water fishing Tenkara with a Tenkara rod. It's not Tenkara fishing per se, because I'm not using the same types of flies and things like that, or the line, but for me it works really well. One other thing about the polypropylene line is once it gets a little water in it, it gets a little weight to it, and it's really easy to cast even if it's super windy outside. This weekend I was fishing and it was non-stop wind, you know, probably between 5 and 10 miles an hour, and I mean there was enough weight with the polypropylene line and a little bit of water it had on it that it would cast super easy, no problem. So I just thought I'd share some of that with y'all, and I will show you a little clip of me landing a decent sized little bass, especially for the creek we were on. But it just kind of affirmed to me that, you know, this rod can take a little bit of abuse, because it did make a couple of hard runs, and it even ran under my boat, and I had to kind of maneuver back behind me with the rod to swing it around to the side where I could grab the line and pull the fish in from there. But I hope y'all enjoyed this, and I really think a lot of people would like this technique, just because you can get off so many casts so quickly if you're fishing small creeks and things like that. And I do that from a kayak, and it is just perfect for that style of fishing. So I just wanted to share that with everybody, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks, and take care.